Hello there, friends. It's your boy here with another episode of All the Mods. And this episode, I believe, is going to be a bit of a world improvement episode. We have some glaring problems in this world. First and foremost is our RF generation. If we just take a look here, it is, it's about non-existent. So our canola setup we built a little bit ago, it works, just very, very slowly. We're hardly getting any canola in. And we did upgrade our machinery and our infrastructure so we could handle more canola, so I think it's about time we speed this farm up, and I have a couple ways to do that. The first of those ways is going to be some fertilized dirt from random things. So fertilized dirt has some special properties. For one, it's going to hydrate itself so you don't need any water blocks around. 2, you can't actually trample crops on it no matter how hard you try. And 3, and really the main reason we're using it, is because it's going to apply random bone meal ticks to any crops planted on it. But it looks like it's not really working right now, because normally the planter would till all that land for us and plant all the crops automatically. But that's because we just have to do the first little round of tilling ourselves. And we just gotta tell it basically, yo dog, you can plant stuff here. It's all good. So this alone is actually pretty good for speeding up crop growth. This is already way faster. You can see bone meal ticks going off and crops already growing. It's pretty sweet. But I do have a second way that I want to speed up these crops, and that would be using the Roots mod. So we know the Roots mod is all about infusing items with magical energy from nature, so it makes sense that we could infuse some attuned standing stones with some magical energy and give them some different effects. So here I've just made a bunch of growing standing stones. So we can place these all around our crops and they will, you guessed it, make our crops grow faster. Alright, so they're pretty arbitrarily placed around, but alone these standing stones are not going to make that big of a difference. It's only when you stack their effects you really notice an improvement. So here I have 5, which I think is a pretty sweet spot number. Potentially you could fit a ton of these around an area, as their AoE has a 9 block radius. But these things do cause a little bit of lag, and 5 seems to be a pretty good number for this size of farm at least. And our planter is hardly keeping up, so I think this is a good speed for our crops. But now finally we can get some consistent RF generation. Yeah, now this generator is filling up. Yeah, it's doing its thing. Finally. So that's one world improvement project done, but I think with this newfound RF power, we should move on to our next little project. And that project is going to involve our storage. So I've been relying on these storage crates for a while now, and they've been working, but we are slowly running out of space here. So I think we are finally going to get into some refined storage. So refined storage is an applied energistics type mod, where we're going to digitally store our items on disks, which compacts everything down, and we also have cool features like auto crafting to make everything so much easier. So the first thing we need is a controller. Now I'm going to go ahead and just temporarily place my controller and pretty much my whole network right here, but I'm going to move it over to where these storage crates are once I'm actually able to move those. So let's place down the controller, and that's going to fill up with some RF. And this is the brains of our network, so everything in our network is going to be centralized and connected to this controller. But this is pretty much one of the only things we can craft right now in the refined storage mod. To get more stuff, we're going to need a solderer. So we can place our solderer down right next to the controller, and it's going to passively use up a bit of RF. So if we look in our controller, we can see that our solderer is connected, and it's using 3 RS per tick, although RS is the same as RF, essentially. You'll notice we don't have any wires hooked up to this, but it's still getting RF. We don't need to hook up all of our machines with RF. As long as it's hooked up to the system, it'll get spotted RF. How many times can I say RF? We're gonna find out. So now that we have our solderer, we can now make some different circuits, and that's mainly what we need to progress more in refined storage. So I'm going to need an advanced processor in order to make a disk drive. Now the disk drive is going to hold all of our storage disks, so we can connect that up, and in the controller we can see this is using 0 RS per tick because we don't have any drives in there. So that's the next thing we need to make, is some drives. And there are different tiers of drives. We can go with 1K all the way up to 64K, and each of these drives you can see holds that many items. So 1K holds 1000, 4K holds 4000, and for me it's go big or go home, okay? We are going to go straight for the 64K storage disk. We're not making any compromises here. But in order to actually get up to the 64K, we're going to have to go through every single tier, and it's a lot of parts and processes we're going to need. It's pretty ridiculous. But I think we finally got all the stuff we need to actually make the 64K part, hopefully. So we need 9 4K, we need 3 16K, looking good, and 1 64K. Alright, but that alone is not actually going to store anything. We need a storage housing. Then all we do, we just combine those, and we get a 64K storage disk. So let's put that in there, and now you can see that it's using up 1 RS a tick because we have 1 drive. But of course, we can't really access these items right now. We're going to need a grid in order to access those items. And for that, we're going to need a construction and destruction core. And then we can make the grid. And I also want to upgrade this grid a little bit, so we need the grid, an advanced processor, and a crafting table. And that will make a crafting grid. So we can place this down, and now we actually have access to our disk. Now the regular grid would not have this little crafting square, but we upgraded it to the crafting grid, so we can craft straight out of our disk here. And that is looking good, so now we can put items in. So we have 36 quartz enriched iron, and you'll see on the disk drive it says 36 out of 64,000. And we can take those out, and it'll say 0. So yeah, we can finally start moving all of our stuff into our grid. So I'm going to go ahead and start doing that. It probably won't take me too long, and I'm just going to manually move them for now because we don't have that many items. It won't take me too many trips. Okey dokey. So everything is moved. I got rid of all of this ore processing because we're going to move that to another house. But now we have all of our ores and everything in here. And if we look at how full our disk is, we are only 12% full with all of our items. So this 64K disk is gonna do us pretty well here. But I did say that I wanted to move my stuff over here, so we can do that right now. The cool thing about these disks is that it stores your items digitally, as I said. So we can take this disk out, and it's still going to keep all the items. We still have 7,700 items. So now we can move all of our stuff, and I've already hooked up a bit of power over here. So we can hook up our controller, our grid, and our disk drive. I'm going to place a solderer there, I suppose. And now everything's hooked up again. And now all we have to do is put in our 64K disk, and we have access to it. So I do want to do a bit of refining to our refined storage system. As you can see, this solderer, even though we're not using it, is using 3 RF a tick. We can fix that really quick by just changing the redstone mode to only working with a redstone signal. Actually, we're going to change it to only working without redstone signal. And now when we flip this lever, it's going to disconnect from our network, and it's not going to use any RF a tick anymore. We could also do the same thing with our grid and disk drive, but it's okay. 5 RF per tick isn't that bad. And another little maintenance thing I want to do that's, I think, just good practice for this kind of storage system is to separate out all of the bulk blocks that we have. So things that we're going to get a ton of, like cobblestone and dirt and logs. Because of our tree farm, we're going to get a ton of logs. So I want to separate those out so they're not taking up space on my disk, and my disk doesn't get all clogged up with those things. And to do that, we're going to use some modular storage from RF Tools. So first we need the modular storage blocks, and then we need to make storage modules, which are the things that are actually going to hold our blocks, similarly to how our disk in our refined storage system is the thing that actually holds the items. So, as I say, go big or go home, we went for tier 3 storage modules, which means we can store 300 stacks of items on each of these. And then the last thing we need is some external storage, so we're going to make a few cables, and then we can make 3 external storages. Alright, so we're going to set this up now. So these modular storage blocks you just place down, they don't need any RF or anything. Then you just put in these storage modules, and you can store items in there just like that. Now I left a gap here, and I know this is uneven and everything, but I'm going to expand this later, and for now this is how I want it. Alright, so currently we don't have any oak wood in our system, so we're going to put the oak wood in this modular storage. In our system we still don't have any oak wood because this modular storage is not connected to our network, but that is what the external storage is for. So with this we can connect up any inventories to our refined storage network. All we have to do is just hook it up with some cables. So I've already dug a bit of a tunnel, and we can just lead these cables down and into the controller. Of course, we don't have to actually hook this up to the controller. This can go to any working part of our storage system. Alright, so that's all hooked up now. If we look in the controller, we can see we have 3 external storages. They're each using 1 RS per tick. And now in our grid, if we scroll down a little bit, we can see the oak wood here. So that is the same 35 oak wood that's in the storage module. Now if we take this oak wood out, it's actually going to take it right out of the storage module. So now there's no oak wood and we can put it back in. But the problem is if we put oak wood straight into this grid, like we ideally would, that oak wood will not actually go into the storage module. Instead, it's going to go into the disk. But we can actually fix that pretty easily by just changing the priority on these storage buses. So if we change the priority of these to 1, these are going to have precedence over our storage disk. And you can change the priority of your storage disk in here, so I'm going to set this to 0. So this is less than our external storages, so things will get taken out and put into our external storages before they get put into our storage disk. Of course, that would mean that everything we put into our grid would go in there, so I actually need to filter these external storages. So this one, we will say this one is the cobblestone one, this one will be the log one, and then this one will be the dirt one. So now only those blocks will go into those modular storages. So now if I were to put a stack of cobblestone into our system, you'll see it actually went into this modular storage. And if I take out a stack of cobblestone, it got taken out of this because it's going to get taken in and out of these modular storages first. So now I can reinsert all this stuff, and all of those bulk blocks that we specify are just going to go straight into our modular storage. Alright, and there we have it. Everything is here, and this didn't actually save us that much room currently because we didn't have that many blocks. Well, actually it did save us about 2%, which is pretty good. But in the future we're going to be getting a lot of these blocks, so I'm just future-proofing this kind of. So another convenience sort of thing I would like is to be able to input into our refined storage system from anywhere in the world, and we can actually do that pretty easily by making some remote storage. So first we need the remote storage block, and then we're going to need at least one remote storage module. So we can place down the remote storage block, and this actually does take a little bit of RF, so I did already run a line to it. Now what remote storage does is it's basically a way to centralize one storage module, so one of these storage modules that actually holds the items between multiple of these blocks. So essentially multiple modular storage blocks are going to share the same storage module. So I can kind of demonstrate this. We're going to take out this oak wood storage module and we're going to put it into our remote storage. Now that's going to get a link ID, and we can actually link that up with our remote storage module, so that has ID 1 now. And so now if we put in our remote storage module into the modular storage block, we can now access the oak wood. So if we take out oak wood, it's not actually going to take out of this remote storage, but rather it's going to take out of this storage module. You see there are 0 stacks there now. If you put in 1, now there's 1 stack. So by just making multiple of these remote storage modules, we can link these up to the same regular module, and we can access these from different places. But I'm actually going to keep this module in this modular storage. I don't really want to remotely access our logs quite yet. Instead, we are going to make another modular storage block as well as another module, and I'm just going to keep this one as tier 1. And so this tier 1 module is the one we're going to link to, so I'm going to actually link all these up to ID 2, which is going to be our input ID. And then we're also going to need an importer from refined storage. So I'm going to place our modular storage down back here, and I'm going to place the importer facing into the modular storage, and then this cable automatically connects to the controller. So now if we put in one of these remote storage modules, we can input things into this modular storage, and it's going to get output into our refined storage network. So anything we put in here will get put into our little network here. So now we can run to our tree farm. And I've removed all the storage drawers and stuff in this little house because instead of outputting items into there, we're actually going to input straight into our refined storage network. So I've gotten rid of the laser relays and all, and instead of that we are going to place down a modular storage, and we're going to put in our remote storage link card with ID 2, which is going to be our input ID. And you can see things are getting taken out because that importer is importing them into our refined storage network. And I'm actually just going to go ahead and just put all these items in here because I don't really need them. Now if we look at the modular storage in our base, we can see all the items we just put in there are now arrived here because we're using the same ID, and then this link card has 13 stacks in it. So essentially it's just a way to wirelessly transport items. But this importer is awfully slow. It's working pretty much like as fast as a hopper is, but we can speed that up. And to do that, we're gonna need some upgrade bases. So we're gonna make 4 of the, or 3 of those. 3 will do for now, but if you put in an upgrade and then a couple sugar around it in the solderer, we are going to get a speed upgrade. And then we can come into our importer and put those right in this little side slot here. Now you can see things are going a lot more quickly. This importer is, however, using a bit more RS per tick now that we put those speed upgrades in. For each speed upgrade, it looks like it's 2 extra RS per tick, because we have 3 in there and it normally just uses 1, but that's not too big of a deal. And I've made the 4th speed upgrade so we can see how fast this actually imports, and yeah, that'll do it, I think. And another cool thing about this little input system is that we can make a storage module tablet, and we can craft this storage module together with our remote storage module linked to our input chest. And now if we right click, it's going to say we don't have enough energy to open the contents because we do need to charge this up a bit. But now if we open this up, we have access to that input chest. or input module rather. So we can put in chests and we can put in apples, and those will get imported into our refined storage system. But now as long as this area is loaded, we should be able to access our input chest and dump in our items whenever we need to. So let's solve another problem, and that would be with this stinking canola farm again. Now that we upped the speed of the canola, this hoe is going to run out much more quickly, so we need to start automating some hoe production. And to do that, we are going to do some refined storage auto crafting. So the first thing we need is a crafter that's going to actually do the crafting operations. We're also going to need a grid that we're going to turn into a pattern grid, but first we need patterns. So we're going to make a few patterns actually. Let's just make like 7 patterns. Seems pretty good to me. So let's throw that in the solderer and make that a crap pattern grid, whatever it's called. Alright, there we go. So let's grab our crafter and let's grab some cables as well. Alright, so I've ran some cables over here so we can connect this up to our network. So we're going to put the crafter down and the pattern grid, and those will both connect, I believe. Yes. So in order to actually auto-craft, we have to give the crafter some patterns, and to actually make those crafting patterns, we use the pattern grid. So the first thing we want to tell it to make is some oak wood planks, and after that we can tell it how to make sticks, and then with those sticks we can tell it how to make hoes. So those are the 3 steps to turn logs and cobblestone into hoes. So let's just put those straight in, and it bothers me if they're not in sequential order. There we go. So now if we come over to our grid and we search hoe, we have the ability to craft hoes. So if we request a hoe, that should do its thing and we should get a hoe. We did. Alright, that's fine and dandy, but there also is a way to monitor whatever we're crafting at any given point. And you guessed it, that's the crafting monitor. And we'll place it right here. And so anytime we start a crafting process, it's going to show up in the crafting monitor. So if we craft another hoe, it actually just requests like 2 hoes, I suppose. We can go into the crafting monitor and see, well, that was quick. But also a good thing about this crafting monitor is if we take out all the cobblestone and then request a hoe, it will actually tell us like what items we're missing. So it says missing items cobblestone, and this is stopped. Then whenever we put in cobblestone, it'll resume. Alright, now that we can make hoes, the next thing we have to do is actually export the hoes into our planter way over there. And to do that, we are going to need an exporter. Let's make one of those. And of course, we are actually going to have to hook this up to our network, so I'm going to run a big long cable line underground. Alright, so we got the cable line hooked up, so let's put the exporter right into the planter. And it's not actually going to export anything yet because we have to tell it what to export. And I also forgot a pretty important part of this is the crafting upgrade. Alright, so let's put the hoe in there, and now whenever we take this hoe out, it's going to export one straight from our grid and put a stone hoe in there. And then I'm also going to put the crafting upgrade in there, and we'll see what that does right now. So whenever we take out all the hoes in the system, so there are no more hoes left, the crafting upgrade is going to automatically craft up another hoe, as you can see. So the crafting upgrade is going to keep at least one of that item stocked, and if it needs to, it will auto-craft that item to make sure there's one ready to export in case that planter needs it. So that right there is completely automated planter. Finally, that thing is completely automated. We don't have to worry about it at all, and it's generating quite a bit of RF for us. Oakley dokley. So I want to keep working with our refined storage system, and right now I want to automate the solderer so I can make upgrades and all that without having to go through all the processes myself. Now, in order to automate machines like the alloy smelter or the solderer, we're going to need a specific type of pattern that we can't just make in our pattern grid. But before we do that, let's actually auto-craft patterns. I think this is pretty important, so I don't have to worry about it. So the type of pattern we need is a processing pattern, which are made in the processing pattern encoders. Now this processing pattern encoder doesn't actually have to be hooked up to our network at all. It doesn't use any RF or anything like that, so we can place it right there and still use it. So let's go ahead and encode the first tier of processors, which are these printed processors. So all we have to do is put in the input and then the output. So 1 silicon gets us 1 printed silicon, 1 iron gets us 1 printed basic, a diamond gets us a printed advanced, and a gold gets a printed improved. Alright, so now let's actually automate these solderers. I'm going to do it right over here at the end of the base. I think there's enough room. So the way we're going to automate these is by using their directionally specific inputs. So anything we put into the left side will always go into the top slot. Anything we put into the top side is always going to go into the middle slot. And anything we put into the right side will always go into the bottom slot. So knowing that, we can look at the first tier of processor and we can see that all of them require whatever material in the middle of the solderer. So let's get a crafter and place it facing downwards into our solderer. So whenever we put processing patterns in the crafter, it's basically just going to output the items into the inventory that is adjacent to this face with the tools on it. So it's going to output any silicon or gold or diamond or whatever into the top of this solderer, since this is facing downwards into the top. And that means any item is going to go into this slot, which will make us the first tier of processor. But I did go ahead and change this up a little bit. Instead of inputting straight into the top, I'm going to output into this chest because this crafter is facing into the chest, and that's just going to pull out into the solderer. And I also went ahead and encoded all the other patterns that we're going to be using. So now all we have to do is hook these up with some cables, and we should be able to craft up those 4 different processors now. But we also have to output those into our network. So I'm just going to pull them out with a hopper and then place an importer right on that hopper. And so whenever it's done, the processor will go into this hopper and into our system. So if we run over here, we should, if we just search processor, be able to craft these. And you can see the other ones that I encoded as well. Let's craft up some of these diamond ones, and let's just do 3 of them. So this crafter is going to output items one at a time, and it's going to wait until this diamond is done soldering up. And once that's done, it's going to output another one. But yeah, that seems to be working perfectly for that one, so let's go ahead and automate the other solderers. So the next solderer is going to be dedicated to crafting these tier 2 processors, so the basic, improved, and advanced. And in all of these, the crafting recipe goes the printed version of the processor, redstone, and then printed silicon. So let's place down our solderer, and then we can get a chest and put that in front of that crafter, and then we will extract out of this chest and put those items into their respective sides. Now I don't want these connecting, so I will disconnect that, and then we will set all of these to extract and insert on each of the sides. And then we're going to use an item filter to specify what goes in each slot. So when we're inputting into the top, which is the middle slot, we only want redstone. When we input into the right side, which is this side because we place the solder facing this way, we only want printed silicon to go in. And on the left, meaning the top slot, we only want the printed version of these processors going. And that should be that set up. So all we have to do is output out of there, and I'm just going to place another hopper, and this hopper is just going to lead into here, so we can just centralize all the outputs. And now if we run over here, we should be able to craft one of those up. So let's craft a couple of these improved processors. So that should have, instantly output the right items. They all went into the right slots because we put them in the right direction. And that looks like it's working well. And in that crafting process, we did run out of printed silicon, so it actually went over and automatically made another printed silicon here. And if it needed another printed improved processor, it would automatically make one in there. So that is perfect. So the third solder in the line is going to be dedicated for these upgrades. So the only 3 upgrades we actually craft in the solder are the range upgrade, the speed upgrade, and the crafting upgrade. And in each of these recipes, there's a pattern as well. So it's always an upgrade base and then 2 of whatever material goes on top and bottom. So I went ahead and taught this crafter how to make those upgrade bases, sugar and crafting tables. So we have those 3 materials always ready. And I did already encode those patterns, except for the range upgrade, which I just did now. So let's place down another chest, our other solderer, we're going to place it facing this way again, and then let's hook up the conduits. So we're going to do pretty much the same setup with these inputs, just change up the items. So in the middle slot, which means the top, we're only going to input upgrades. And in the side slots, we're only going to input sugar, crafting tables, and ender pearls. But we are going to have to change up this output a little bit. We're going to put it at a speed downgrade, and that's going to make it so the conduit only pulls out 1 item at a time. And then we're also going to enable round robin. So whenever I request a speed upgrade, it's going to put 2 sugar into this chest. But if we didn't have this speed downgrade and round robin on, then it would always output into the same slot, so it would end up with like 2 sugar in this slot, which doesn't really do us much good. But with the downgrade and round robin, it'll pull out 1 sugar, put it into this slot, and it'll pull out the other sugar and put it into this slot. As you can see, it will always go into different slots, which is exactly what we want to actually craft these upgrades. So that is that one completely done. All we have to do is extract out that hopper so it goes into our little input hopper there. And this whole thing is pretty much done now, I believe. Now these refined storage cables don't have facades, but they do have multi-part support. So if I just go to plain, I can actually just cover this up by placing down some chisels and bits, and it still connects up, and there's a bit of clipping, I guess, but it looks better than nothing, I suppose. So let's try testing this out really quick now that it looks all nice. Let's just request 4 speed upgrades and see what happens. Hopefully this actually works. And a little while later, it looks like our speed upgrades are done. This isn't the fastest system ever, but it's definitely a lot better than me just doing it by hand. Oogly doogly. So I think it's about time we take a break from refined storage and we come over to our Botania area. And in this little Botania session, my goal is to get to Alfheim. We're gonna need some Alfheim materials for next episode, but in order to get to Alfheim, we are going to need a bit of Terra Steel, So for that, we're going to need a terrasteel agglomeration plate, so I went ahead and made all the runes here. So the terrasteel agglomeration plate is a multi-block structure. So we're going to need a 3x3 little area here. Block that the agglomeration plate actually sits on needs to be living rock, and then it's just a checker pattern with living rock and lapis. So let's place the terrasteel agglomeration plate right there, and that is our multi-block. Now this plate does need mana. We do have to supply it with mana like we do the runic altar. But the thing is, we can't supply it with mana using mana spreaders like we can with the altar. Instead, we have to use a different form of mana manipulation, and that would be the spark. So we're going to get a couple of those, and we're going to place one spark over our mana pool, and another spark right over our terrasteel agglomeration plate. I don't know how many times I'm going to say that, but yeah. So basically, mana is just going to get transferred between these sparks, sort of wirelessly, I suppose. For now, we're kind of limited in how we can use sparks. We can only really use them for things like the terrasteel plate and the runic altar. But in the future, we'll be able to manipulate sparks more so we can send, mana to different mana pools and spreaders and things like that. But we are going to go ahead and make some terrasteel, and to make terrasteel, we are going to need to give this plate at least half of a pool of mana, which is a crap ton of mana. So I went ahead and made 4 more endoflames, and this is pretty temporary. I don't want to use endoflames for that long, but we got the tree farm. We have a ton of wood, so it's not that big of a deal if we use up charcoal. I also transported some mana from the tree farm over here, which is where most of the mana came from, and we do have enough now. So all we have to do is just throw on a mana diamond, a mana steel ingot, and a mana pearl. Oh no. Oh, that was close. And you can see these particle effects are kind of running over into the spark. This pool should be draining pretty rapidly, yeah. And there we go, our terrasteel is now done, and we do only need this one ingot of terrasteel to get to Alfheim, which is probably for the best because that's a lot of mana that uses. So now it's time to actually make the portal, and for that we're going to need a few different blocks. For one, we're going to need some glimmering living wood, and using our terrasteel we're going to need an Elven gateway core. Then we're going to need a couple pylons that we're actually going to turn into Natura pylons. And then lastly, we just need a couple mana pools. And Britannia has this cool feature where you can actually visualize the multi-block structures. So all you gotta do is just look at the block you want to place it on. Now right-click it, and it will tell you exactly where everything goes. So let's start building the portal, and I'll tell you why we're going to Alfheim. So we're going there because we need new materials in order to progress more in Britannia. And those materials are only Elven knowledge. So we have to gain those materials by trading the materials we know how to make, so mana steel, mana diamonds, mana pearls, with the elves, and they'll give us their magic fairy pixie stuff in return. Alright, so the last thing we need to do is just right-click on the Elven Gateway Core with our Wand of the Forest. That's going to open up the portal to Alfheim. Now I have been saying that we're going to go to Alfheim, but in all reality, we can't actually go to Alfheim if we stand in there. The connection between the two worlds is not strong enough for us to actually go, but it is strong enough to send items. So we can throw, for instance, our Lexica Britannia in, and the elves are just going to toss it right back, and now we have Elven knowledge. And there's a bunch of lore as to how and why this actually works, and why it's instant. There's like a time rift or something. I don't know. All I know is that it works. We get items. So as I said, we're just going to engage in some trades with the elves, and we're going to make a crap ton of stuff just while we can. We're going to make a bunch of dragonstone, a bunch of elementium, some pixie dust, as well as a bunch of dreamwood. And I'm just making a ton right now because I don't think I'm going to keep this portal open for very long. I'm just going to kind of let this run out. Now, some things to note about the Elven Gateway is that the cost of opening the portal is larger than the cost of maintaining it. So you might think, okay, I'll just shut it down whenever I don't need it, and then I'll just remake it and reignite it. But that's actually inefficient on mana. It's better to just keep it running, because it uses significantly less mana. And there is at least one item that I know of we can make right now using this new Elven knowledge, and we're going to need a Rune of Pride for that. So let's just snag that right up. And if we combine this Rune of Pride with the Elementium we just got, we get a Ring of Far Reach. And this is not a very hard one to figure out. This one is going to just extend our range where we can reach by about 3 blocks, which is pretty crazy actually. We can reach super far away. And we can still interact with all the entities and things over there. We can hit mobs and things. So that's pretty sweet, and there is also one more ring that I'd like to make. This one does not require Elven knowledge, but it's just really useful. It's the Ring of the Mantle, so if we put this on, you can see we automatically get a haste 2 effect, and this is always applied to us, as long as we have the ring on and we have mana in our inventory, of course. Each of these rings uses up mana. But yeah, we can reach farther and we can dig faster, which is pretty cool, I think. But I think that is where I am going to leave you guys for this episode. I know we didn't do too much in this episode. It really wasn't that exciting. It was kind of boring, especially considering how long it took me to make this episode. The amount of content was pretty lackluster there. And I do apologize for that, but I can promise you next episode will be way, way cooler. So stay tuned for that one. I'm going to try and make it a bit faster. But school started up, so I'm not able to make videos as fast as I'd like to, but I'm pretty confident I can make them faster than I am now. So if you made it this far into the episode, you guys are champions. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye.
Chillin' the wasteland sands. Raps on backs and treasure maps, stacks to the ceiling fan. He rests on these ashes. Ask him after 10 miles in his galoshes, smash his stashes. Chip on his shoulder with a slip-on holster. A clip, a folder, and his grip on a molder bolster. They supposed to know and show in his aura glow. Get from out the road when he get dough. It's horrible.